All right, so it's Sunday morning, November the 8th. Our Sunday school lesson today, as I said, is out of the study guide, page 109. The title of it is Relational Foundations. And this, again, is one of the next to last lesson of this quarter. And we transition from Proverbs into Song of Solomon or Song of Songs, is how it's referred to in the study guide. And as I was saying a moment ago, people interpret Song of Songs or Song of Solomon differently. We'll talk about sort of literally what it represents, at least the way it's portrayed in the way it was written, and then kind of the metaphorical or the symbolic thing that it stands for as well. But the verses for the lesson today, it's Song of Songs, chapter 2, verses 15 through 17, which is the end of that chapter, and then verses 1 through 5 of chapter 3, Song of Songs. In the study guide, it gives us the introduction. First of all, the title again is Relational Foundations. And it says, God created humans to be relational, with the greatest relationship being between him and his people. So what this is saying is we're all pretty social creatures. Even, I'm maybe less social than people. I don't really feel like I need to be around people a lot of times, although I like being around people, and you all know I can talk. But people, generally speaking, are social creatures. We like to have interaction with other people. And so that's part of this. But also, ultimately, the relationship that God wants to have with us is a personal relationship, right? He can be our friend, someone that we can talk to, lean on, have that reverential awe, that fear of God. Remember, from the beginning of this quarter, Proverbs 1, chapter 7, where we started, remember, fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and that's kind of paraphrased. So there's that reverential awe, that fear of the Lord that we should have. That should be what grounds us in all that we know and we do. But ultimately, God wants to have a relationship with us. And so, as a sort of an introduction to Song of Songs on page 109, in the introduction to this lesson, it says, this is kind of very generic with respect to relationships. It says, children are told that God made their hands for holding crayons, not hitting their siblings. Now, for those of you who have siblings, maybe you have, or even relationships in school, when the tendency for people is to kind of be selfish, and that can lead to arguments and such, right? So I can see how imagine being a kindergarten teacher or first grade teacher, and when kids start being kind of how kids can be, no, I want that, it's mine. And then the next thing turns into a swat or a push or a little shove. And so I can see how people could use this. Children are told that God made their hands for holding crayons, not hitting their siblings or others. Think about that, what your hands should be used for. Children may also be reminded, it says, that God, made their teeth for chewing, not biting. There's another little thing that can happen when, young people, hopefully only young people. I mean, there are big people who bite too, I guess. But how you use what God gave you. Furthermore, they may be taught that he made their hearts for loving others, not hating them. Okay? When we give ourselves to Christ, we become God's children. In his wisdom, he tells us that he made our lives for sharing with others, not hoarding for ourselves. That's why healthy relationships matter. So again, that's kind of a really broad overview of this relationship that God ultimately wants with us and how we should kind of try to treat each other. Now, on page 110, specifically for today's lesson and kind of a little bit of an overview of Song of Songs, it says the Song of Songs, sometimes called the Song of Solomon, depending on which version of the Bible that you look at. It says it is God's wise counsel regarding love and relational intimacy. So literally, what this story tells, and we'll look at it here in the second. I guess it goes it's in this first paragraph of the introduction. It says the book of Song of Songs is a poetic chronicle of Solomon's romantic relationship with the woman in the poem. So here's kind of who's in this short book of the Bible. It says Solomon speaks as the man. So it looks like there are 5 parts, if you will, in this book. Solomon speaks as the man. The poem includes 4 other voices. The woman, who is his the woman that he loves and ultimately marries. The young women, so there are other young women in this book, that the main woman, Solomon's fiance, if you will, she kind of talks to and talks about. Then there's the narrator, whoever's telling the story, and then there are brothers in the story as well. So it says the five voices blend together to produce rich insights into God's wisdom regarding relationships, love, romance, and marriage. So ultimately, again, what this book tells the story of is Solomon's relationship with this girl who he ends up marrying, and then it kind of the conversation kind of bounces between the two of them and to and about the others, the brothers and the other young women in the story. Okay, now. So as we look at the verses in the story, and we'll look at it mainly from the perspective, the verses we're looking at today is from the young woman, Solomon's girlfriend, fiance, that he ends up marrying. And so what it talks about is kind of how she loves him, longs for him. When he's not around, she misses him. She wants to be with him. And then there's another part of it that we've talked about before, and that talks about as again, part of this is about that intimate relationship. That what this stresses, as we talked about before, is God's intention for that, the relationship between a man and a woman, and then how that should be, the sexual relationship should wait until marriage. Okay, so the verses. Let's read verses 15 through 17 to start with. Actually, it starts with verse 15. I'm just going to go ahead and read this out of CSB. Again, we have 15 through 17 in chapter 2, and then we'll go to verses 1 through 5 in chapter 3. So in verse 15, it says, "Catch the foxes for us, the little foxes that ruin the vineyards, for our vineyards are in bloom." So when you read this first verse, okay, so this is a story about this, man and this woman that are kind of dating in love, expecting to be married, and it's talking about foxes. So clearly this is a symbolic verse here, figuratively speaking. And it talks about in the study guide how people interpret things differently. All right. So we're just going to kind of follow what it says in the study guide as far as what they're saying here. So the first thing it says, again, Solomon's love poem, this is the Song of Solomon, the book, tells a story about his romantic relationship with the Shulamite woman, so which was ends up being one of his wives. It says the love of his life, who had become his wife. Okay. It says, like other love poems, it's written with a rich blend of literal and figurative language. And interpreting parts of the poem can be challenging at times. So the way the study guide looks at it, it says the wisest approach to interpreting this verse, so verse 15, starts with an understanding that God's people who live according to his wisdom protect their relationships with each other. Guarding relationships become necessary when we realize predators abound. All right, so we'll come back to how that relates to us in just a moment. Predators can destroy a relationship without anyone knowing the damage they have done until it's too late. Okay? And again, to relate this to Solomon and this woman, going from a dating relationship, if you will, to a marriage relationship, the relationship between a husband and wife can be particularly susceptible to predators that can gnaw at a couple's devotion to each other. For that reason, a wise Christian couple makes guarding their marriage a high priority. So now, let's step out of the study guide for just a moment and come back to just the overall theme of this. Again, it's talking about how predators, you think about your relationship. I don't know or think that any of you date per se right now, that you have like a steady boyfriend or girlfriend. You will at some point. But you have relationships with other people, right? You have guy friends, girlfriends that you hang out with, and that's a relationship. There's trust involved with that. There's, a lot about each other. And you've probably seen, even in those relationships, that if you're close to someone, there may be other people that are jealous of that and can interfere with it to try to, I don't know, maybe still take your attention away, or again, if a lot of times it's because of envy, but other things. But people can interfere in your relationship and cause problems between you and that other person, right? Same thing can happen. Possibly you start dating, and you, again, at the marriage point, that's when, as the Bible says, you cleave from your family to cleave to one another, right? So You're still related to your family. You still love your family, but at that point of marriage, you literally are, well, literally, you don't literally cleave into, one person. So figuratively, I guess, you and the person that you marry get into a relationship that you are now a different entity, right? That becomes the focus of your life. Now, you don't disregard all the others in your family and your life, but that's the marriage relationship as the Bible defines it. Okay. So as friends, when you start dating, in the marriage relationship, any relationship, there can be things that come along that affect it, sometimes intentional, right? So that's what he's talking about here, where it says, catch the foxes for us, the little foxes that ruin the vineyards, for our vineyards are in bloom. So let's step back in the study guide now. After it just said that the relationship between a husband and wife can be particularly susceptible to predators that can gnaw at a couple's devotion to each other. So on page 112, it says, despite a variety of interpretations of verse 15. So again, remember, this is obviously not a literal verse, but it says the term vineyards in this verse refers to marriage. So catch the foxes for us, the little foxes that ruin the vineyards. If you think about foxes, foxes are meant to be sly, kind of wily. They can sneak in being pretty stealthy. And the one that comes to my mind is the fox in the hen house. They can come in and take your chickens. That's where that came from. Steal your chickens because they're going to eat them. But they're kind of sneaky, and they can do some damage without you knowing about it until it's too late. Okay. So again, when it says catch the foxes for us, the little foxes that ruin the vineyards, think about vineyards as marriage, and from a younger perspective of any relationship between you, whether it be between you and God, you and a friend, you and a boyfriend or girlfriend, and up ultimately to marriage. In bloom, so it says on the second half of that verse, after it says, watch out for the foxes that ruin the vineyards, for our vineyards are in bloom. It says vineyards refers to marriage. I'm sorry, in bloom refers to the beauty before the harvest, referencing the beauty of two lovers anticipating marriage. So that's the vineyards are in bloom. So when you've got this, you've dated, you're become engaged, you're looking forward to having a life with this person, that's what this is referring to when it says our vineyards are in bloom. The marriage is imminent, or it's coming, okay? And so we have to protect it even then. The term foxes, it says, or little foxes, hints at anything that could be harmful to the marriage. Just as a fox must be caught before it ruins a vineyard, so too must a marriage be protected from those things that can wreck and ruin a marriage relationship. All right. So there again, that's kind of the overall foundation. The next couple of verses, 16 and 17, let's read through those. It says, my love is mine. And so again, this is the perspective from the girl in this relationship. My love is mine, and I am his. He feeds among the lilies. Until the day breaks and the shadows flee, turn around, my love, and be like a gazelle or a young stag in the divided mountains. And so what this lady is expressing in this poem, in her part, is the love that she feels for Solomon in this case. All right. And so she's just expressing that. It says in the study guide on page 113, notice how dedicated the soon-to-be husband and wife were to each other. My love is mine, and I am his, it says in verse 16. Marriage requires a mutual commitment to each other. And again, this is at the marriage level, but so just for your future consideration. The woman is the speaker in verses 16 to 17. In verse 17, she looks forward to how their intimacy would be expressed after they are married until the day breaks, it says. That's the beginning of verse 17. Anticipates that day of their marriage. Her description reveals both anticipation and trust, and you can see when she's talking about to her, her love, her man, be like a gazelle and a young stag. And if you think about a powerful animal, the majestic animal, so she is expressing her love for her fiance. Okay. All right. So that's sort of at the end of chapter 2. Now let's look at the next 5 verses, which is chapter 3. All right. Okay. So again, this is from the girl's perspective. And this is sort of, if you think about this, of this person who has someone that they love, that they're going to be married to, and how they think about them. Their mind is on this person. How when they're away, they miss them. They want to be with them. They're looking forward to the day they're married. So here's what she says in the first 5 verses of chapter 3. In my bed at night, I sought the one I love. I sought him, but did not find him. I will arise now and go about the city, through the streets and the plazas. I will seek the one I love. I sought him, but did not find him. So she's saying that when he's not around, she misses him. She wants to be with him. Okay, and again, that's how a strong, healthy relationship should be. The guards who go about the city found me. I asked them, "Have you seen the one I love?" I mean, she's again figuratively wants to find. Where are you? I miss you. I want to be around you. I want to be with you. Verse 4, I had just passed them when I found the one I love. I held on to him and would not let him go until I brought him to my mother's house, to the chamber of the one who conceived me. Young women of Jerusalem, I charge you, by the gazelles and the wild does of the field, do not stir up or awaken love until the appropriate time. Okay. So again, we've talked about in the first couple of verses how she's looking for she wants to be with her fiance. In this allegory or dream, or however she's speaking of it, she finds him in verse 4, and now that she's got him back to her, she don't want to be separated from him again. So we'll talk about kind of what she does at that point. Okay. All right. It says in the study guide now on page 115, it says, these verses tell the story of the woman searching for the one she loved, but she was unable to find him. When she found him, in verse 4, she had to make an important decision. She didn't want to be foolish, but she didn't want to lose him again either. She decided that she would never let him go away from her. And so when you see in verse 4 what she does, says not having him in her life would not be an option. I mean, so that, again, this is a story of that true love. Not having in her life would not be an option. But pay close attention to the fact of where she takes him. Okay? Instead of taking, she wants to have him with her, so she brings him to her mother's house. All right. What's significant in this is when she brings him to her mother's house, and I don't, I'm not trying to be graphic or anything, but look where she takes him. She takes him into the house, but she doesn't take him to her room, if you see what I'm saying. Okay. She takes him to her mother's house, to the chamber of the one who conceived me. So it's a relationship. She's wanting to protect this relationship, but she's not wanting to spoil the relationship, if you will, prior to marriage. All right. So it says, by bringing him there to her mother's house in which she was born instead of her bedroom, she registered her determination to practice restraint. Again, so practically speaking for us, we've talked about this before too, and that is there will be a temptation, likely, as you guys get older, closer, as you start dating, get closer with people, to have sex before marriage. And the Bible is very clear about that. So I'm not going to dwell on that. And that's kind of what this is reinforcing that. Even in this story of love, which is Song of Solomon or Song of Songs is, it is pointed out clearly here as well. So it says, the pursuit of the bride for her soon-to-be husband is noble, but her desires for him would come only after their marriage commitment. All right. There's another, I think of where I missed this. There's another section in the study guide where, so Old Testament kind of talks about how the law was regarding, prior to Christ, with lots of things, but to include a sexual relationship. It mentions in the study guide in Hebrews, which is New Testament, written by Paul. It says Hebrews 13:4 states, marriage is to be honored by all, and the marriage bed kept undefiled, because God will judge the sexually immoral and adulterers. So that relates to marriage, but also it applies again to life as we grow up, grow older. So now to take this poem, the story about Solomon and this young lady and their relationship, of how they long to be with each other, but they're going to do it in the correct way, biblically speaking. To go back to the beginning of how we talked about relationships between little kids, kindergartens, first graders, siblings, and how just because of human nature, we tend to sometimes, in selfishness, tend to argue and fight. That's not God's design, right? That's human nature, but it's not God's design. And ultimately, one of the verses that I like to reference is, let me see if I can find it. Exodus, I think it's 33:11. Here's what God wants, and I love, how this verse speaks. This goes back to the Old Testament with Moses. This is what God this is ultimately, when we get to heaven, the relationship that we're going to have with God. And you can see in verse 11 of Exodus 33, the Lord would speak with Moses face to face, just as a man speaks with his friend. Then Moses would return to the camp. So again, this is as Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt into the wilderness. That's the relationship that he had with God at that time. Now, Moses, is pretty clear in the Bible, Moses could not look at God. He asked before, and God said, I can't let you see me because you couldn't bear it. But what I'm focusing on here is that first sentence. The Lord would speak with Moses face to face, just as a man speaks with his friend. So think about that as how we should be able to, the relationship we should be able to have with God. All right, let me see if I can go back to where I was. There we go. Okay, that's really, this is probably one of the shortest lessons in the study guide that we've had. And again, there's lots of interpretations of it. Hopefully the things that what I want to take out of it is any relationship that you have, you need to be careful, nurture it, culture it, and be aware that there may be predators, as it talks about in here, that can seek to hurt that. Whether it's people, other temptations, whether it be when you're in a committed relationship with someone, other friends that you've had say, hey, how come you're hanging out with her all the time? How about hanging out with us? And that can go whether you're dating or in marriage. Likewise with women, so, friends could say, hey, we miss you. Come hang out with us. And as long as you're careful about how you do that, remember your commitment is to that one person in a marriage. You certainly don't abandon your family or your friends, but you have to be careful. And they may not be intentionally trying to, cause a problem with your relationship, but it can happen. All right. And likewise, again, to relate it back to God, there's a lot of powerful forces through Satan that will try to affect that relationship with God. Okay. Questions or comments on this? All right. Let me stop this. Thank you for being here, and I'll see. We'll come back into Song of Songs next week, perhaps. All right.